we both have experienced some weather in the body,
Yeah.
evidenced by the voice.
Which is, I believe that's something that parents deal with sometimes, Josh.
Yeah.
Even pretty good ones.
Snotty kids, poopy
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah. So I went down hard for 3 days. You sound like you're,
Going down.
yeah, I don't know. Good luck. That's all I can say. But all right, we got another episode of Pretty Good Parent coming at you.
Yeah.
What are we talking about today, Josh?
Just other ways parents screw it up, really. Is specific to, in an attempt to ease anxiety, parents often say things, and I've kind of highlighted like 3 common things parents say that actually make it worse. So it'd be nice to know if like, oh, you're one of those parents that say this, phew, you can stop doing it. And we'll give you some other ideas of what to say.
Awesome. So we're talking about not saying that your kid has to have anxiety as, because I feel like there's some stigma around that. It's like, oh, my kid
this
has
is
anxiety.
not like
But
a
I feel like
diagnosis
every person
specific.
has an anxious moment. So you're talking
Yeah.
about those anxious moments when your kid just comes to you feeling, and you can tell that they're anxious, right? And
Yeah.
so basically the 3 things not to say to them.
Yeah, and you're right. It's not like specific to anxiety or an anxiety disorder, but they're unregulated or they're overwhelmed. They're either really sad, they're really mad, they're really stressed, and parents don't like that, right? You can feel it. You can feel it in yourself. Like you don't want your child to feel bad, and so we say things thinking like, "Oh, this will help. This will make it go away, or this will make them think differently, and they won't feel this bad." And so these comments are an example of that. And then we'll kind of explain how they don't land with the intended impact.
Awesome. I love it because as a parent, I have kids that come to me all the time with an anxious thing, and I probably make them feel more anxious
Yeah.
most of the time.
Yeah. Well, you might hear your
Why'd you say
your
yeah
voice.
so fast?
Well,
yeah.
we know that we're not perfect. Pretty good.
Yeah.
And we're here to learn, right, Dan?
are here to
We
learn.
all say
That's what I'm here
things
for.
that one in the moment we're like, this is probably not appropriate. And then afterwards we definitely are like, oh God, that didn't work. And maybe you've said these things and you thought they worked, and maybe you find out they didn't. And you know, these examples and this advice isn't a one size fits all for every single kid. There are times you can say some of these statements and have really good rapport with your kid, and it land fine. In general, though, we'll explain how these are delivered and why they don't land well, and what you could say differently.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I feel like a telltale sign of it not delivering is when I give something really insightful to my kid and they just start crying. Is that usually good insight that it's not working, Josh?
Yeah.
Okay. That's good. Well, I can't wait now to find out what these are.
Like shame, tears.
Yeah. Shame tears.
Yeah.
That's I should make a t-shirt.
You'll be able to, it'd be nice to be able to hit the record button and pause right after you say something and frame, and then in like a little quiz, like so-and-so's feeling better,
Yeah.
worse, shameful, blamed, discouraged about the world, or helped, and usually that body language is telling. So yeah, tears or more tears
Yeah.
is not the idea. But we also need to make sure that just our discomfort with their emotional state isn't driving us to do something ridiculous, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's okay for them to have a bad moment. What's wise is to figure out what is the moment, and is there any learning, or is it empathetic? You being empathetic during that time. It depends. Sometimes it is a learning opportunity. Sometimes it's a tough day. They're tired. They've been sick. They're unregulated. Just give them a hug.
Right.
But in general, these are the common things that parents say, slightly triggered themselves, or thinking like, oh, this will really help. And it doesn't.
Sweet.
Right? Yeah.
Well, let's, should we do like a little role play or like build a scenario of, let's pick on my 12-year-old who's going to be 13.
Okay.
So I feel like a lot of teenagers probably experience this.
Yeah.
So let's say he walks into, the room real anxious, or maybe I walk into his room, right? And he's all anxious and fired about something. What do I say next?
Yeah. So you're seeing some sort of signs of anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you're thinking, This is not good. I want to be helpful. I don't want him to be troubled. And so I want to help him.
Mm-hmm.
So a common statement that parents would say is, well, what do you have to worry about? You're just a kid. Meaning
Right.
they shouldn't have worries because their topics of focus in their mind aren't real and don't warrant worry. And so they're thinking, if I can unhook them from their worry by telling them these aren't real worries, they're going to feel better.
Yeah.
Right. So let's say your soon to be 13-year-old is worried and you say, hey, so-and-so, what's your problem? You're just a kid. You have nothing to
His
worry
name's
about.
Judd. Let's just call him out.
Call him Judd?
Yeah, we'll call him out.
Okay, he's out. But not that this is Judd. Judd
Yeah.
handles himself really well. But let's say he's anxious.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty good Dan rolls in thinking, oh, I don't want to be anxious. Like, he's a kid. He doesn't have anything to worry about. It's like, Judd, what do you have to anything to worry about? You're just a kid. So you're trying to help, right? By unhooking him from this like burden that he's like ruminating on. Except it doesn't work very well because he's not stuck in like cognitive world. He's not thinking like, well, I'm just a kid and these problems are likely to pass in the few days ahead of me. And it's nothing like the mortgage or work responsibilities like mom and dad have. So I shouldn't worry. Great point, Dad.
Right.
Very unlikely, right? In fact, it not only does it like not land well or help, it's confusing and it's minimizing because anyone can go to someone and say, I don't think you have anything to worry about based on how I see your state in the world. You live in this place. Looks like your bills were paid and your car started today. Like, you shouldn't be able to worry. We don't like to hear that. And it doesn't help us unpack or deal with like whatever we were going through, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to be able to normalize worry, everyone does it. Like, I work with adults and kids, and most adults' worries are just as silly and just as unrealistic of occurring as the kids' worry. But yet the parents are like, no, these are real worries. These are adult worries. Like, oh, okay. Like it's going to happen kind of worry. Well, it could. Oh, okay. So it's not even that probable, but we act like everyone else should not worry. Our worries are legitimate. And then,
Right.
and we're going to release them from that. But if we normalize it and say, hey, worrying is a normal human behavior. Now, normal doesn't mean desirable. It doesn't mean healthy necessarily. But to say it's normal means they're not weird. They're not isolated. There's nothing wrong with them because they're thinking this way compared to the rest of the world. So you normalize it to be like, oh, this isn't something that's like entirely unique to you. And then to like unpack it. Like, what is this? What is this situation? I'd like to hear more. Getting it out of their head and into the outer
So again,
space.
that's leading with a question, not coming in with a
Should. Yeah. No
Yeah.
shoulds.
right.
It's a question. Right. Tell me more. You seem stressed. Would you like to talk about it? Well, no. Oh no, they're stressed and they don't want to talk about it. But I don't want them to continue to be stressed.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, most of the time, people would be better off talking about it, but they might not think it's going to be helpful. They might not want to do it yet. Without disregarding a strong no, there's probably another door or a few other doors you can knock on that might open it up and make it them capable of actually opening up and talking about it. So you go in, you sit down, lower your body language. If he's on his bed or on the floor or at his desk, find some place to be at his same height or lower. And then find a slower pace to maybe open that conversation up. Like, well, he said no, but because you have his best interest in mind, you're going to knock softly on another door.
Right.
Hey, I don't want to bug you. And you say you didn't want to talk about it. But I'm just wondering, like, was it something from today? Was it something from school? Was it something from home? Is it something like coming up? And if it's significant, they're probably going to want to talk about it because it's burdensome to hold on to it, right? And then when they start talking about it, maybe you're thinking, oh, this is nothing. But it's significant to them. And so we're thinking, oh, this is not a problem. Kid, you shouldn't be worried about this and da-da-da-da. But really, they're stuck on it, just like we get stuck on our stuff. And so identifying it, talking about it, then unpacking it. And then maybe the unpacking is, maybe there's something to plan for, or maybe it's just a release. And teaching those skills are vital for their like emotional regulation through life, their ability to encounter a perceived problem, identify it, notice the impact on their body, and then determine, is this something I need to plan for, or is it something I've conjured up or made up and I need to release it? But if you don't take them through those steps, they can get stuck, stay stuck in that place of worry. And then we feel like we're failing, and now we're going to, like, I don't know, in an attempt to further unburden them, insult the situation, like minimize the situation, which doesn't feel good.
So I got a quick question for you, Josh. You on the mindfulness track, right? I've kind of heard a lot about that idea of feeling grateful and gratitude and things like that, right? So sort of like removing yourself from a situation and then just kind of realizing how grateful you are, right?
Yeah.
So I can see how there's sort of a fine line probably between that sort of idea and philosophy versus the, oh, you have it pretty easy, you're just a kid. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So how do you, and maybe the grateful thing isn't a good idea or it is. I don't know. So I guess that's my question. Like, where does that line of being like, hey, can we step out of this and actually feel some gratitude and grateful because, you know, maybe things are pretty good.
Yeah.
Versus the, oh, you're just a kid, like you don't have bills and do all this shit that we have to deal with.
Well, that's that concept of gratitude.
Oh, I thought you were going to say that's a great question.
Oh,
sorry.
I'm sorry. Let me affirm you. You're looking for some affirmation.
Okay, thank you.
Wow. Great thought, Dan. Wow. Good question. It is a good question because a lot of parents do fire off the gratitude remedy, right? But let's swap roles, and you're stressed about something and someone listens for like 30 seconds or less and they're like, oh, Dan, you just should be grateful, buddy.
Yeah.
We can't transition that quickly.
Rarely lands well in the moment.
It feels like an insult, right? I would agree, and I wholesomely believe that gratitude is more important and better to practice. In few situations actually are better to worry about than being grateful for. It's a matter of timing and like the amount of walking through the conversation until someone could possibly be grateful. It's too abrupt to say, oh, I heard your worry. That's not really a thing. Let's just be grateful. Hey, it's sunny out. You have friends. Like, there's a roof over our head. Like, you don't have anything to worry about, kid. That doesn't work very well. It's true. And if they could quickly transition to that felt reality, they wouldn't have stress. But most people have been circling around this like emotional thought pattern, and it takes a little bit of time to get out of that. So this pathway out of this anxiety that they're experiencing will lead to a place where they could be grateful. But it's unpack it, reflect, and then determine, is this something we can plan for, or is this something that we just need to release because it's in our head and we can't really do anything about it? And then maybe you move to gratitude. But that statement is actually another statement I was going to reference of like, these are things parents say that don't help, even though they're trying to help. It's like, well, you should be grateful. I practice gratitude all the time. And if you did that, you wouldn't feel this way.
Wait, is this number 2?
And this is number 2.
No.
You just happened to bring up number 2.
I didn't even...
So
it was
another thing that
good
parents
question.
say
Wow.
that doesn't work. You want to invite them into a practice of gratitude. Again, if I told you after you just told me something you're really worried about, I just told you should be grateful. That's cognitive, that's heady. And what I'm feeling is more here. Now, it started here in a ball of thinking that spun into like this emotional place. Now I'm like, oh, great news. You shouldn't feel that way. You should feel grateful. Practice being grateful. Again, they would be better off if they were grateful, but right now they're in that space. So instead of saying jump from here all the way over here and fast forward to gratitude, you're going to take them on a little walk. Walk option number 1 is unpacking their stress, normalizing it, unpacking the facts, the details, and then determining, does it require planning or releasing? If you've done that and you want to implement gratitude, you'd say, you know what, I have a tendency to worry about some things too. And what works for me sometimes is to take a deep breath and sit back and wonder, how important is this in the big scope of life? And what else is going really well that maybe I've forgotten about? That doesn't mean that the problem doesn't exist or there isn't something to be concerned about. Maybe there is. But gratitude usually is a pretty quick release of stress, because it's hard. You can't hold gratitude at the same time being anxious.
Right.
You do one or the other, right? To say, all right, let's do a quick 5-second, close our eyes and think of one thing we're grateful for. And during that time,
and it sounds like that could be another opportunity for a question, just right. What is something that you're grateful for?
yeah. But if it's too quick of a jump,
Right.
it feels insulting and detached, and it won't work very well. But if you create a little bit of a pathway to that by saying, I know what that's like. I do that sometimes. Here's what I've done that helps me. Would you be willing to try this?
Yeah, that's great.
Like,
Well, I was
just
just thinking that too. Like, would you be like, do you want to try what I try?
Yeah.
You know, and try this and maybe think of something that you're possibly grateful
Yeah.
for, right? So it's kind of that.
Inviting them into it
Yeah.
versus telling them they should, right? Like if a friend invites us into a space for potential solution, that feels better than a judgmental comment like, well, you know what you should be doing, right? We don't like that. So inviting them into a practice of gratitude instead of just telling them they should be grateful. And being a grateful parent and example all the other times in life is your preventative work, right? If this isn't just a tool used during anxiety, it's going to be a more likely preventer if it's how mom and dad regularly talk about life. Like today I had some tough things, but overall, I'm grateful for this and our health and the fact that we're even here today and that my car started and my lungs work and the fridge is working. A million things you could list off, right? If that's heard regularly around the house and it's meant, it's authentic, it's harder to be anxious. It's harder to have a home where anxiety is rampant because, again, you can only do one or the other. You can't be anxious and grateful, and you can't be grateful and anxious. So if mom and dad are regularly talking about what they're grateful for, kids are likely to pick up on that. And when they mention it, it doesn't look like, oh, dad just pulls out his handbook on how to de-escalate his kid. It's dad lives this way.
Right. So like if you're the type of parent that likes to set an example by you get up, you work out every morning and you eat right, it's like maybe add the next on the list, be grateful, right? And
Absolutely.
You do that on a daily basis. You do your workout, you have your nutritious meal and you show gratefulness.
Yeah.
Love it. And that's it.
It's well said. It's arguably maybe even more powerful than all those other things because it's the mind that never turns off. Like exercise is awesome, but it only occupies a little part of your day and there's some residual benefit throughout the day, but the mind is all the time. And to have a mind that's aware enough to be like, hold on, is this really a real thing or an imagined thing? And what's going on in my life right now that I could be grateful for? We're not encouraging or saying you shouldn't ever address problems or ignore them and just find something to be grateful for. It's just that there's usually not really a big problem. It's imagined, and gratitude makes more sense. So if you want that to be one of your skill sets with your kids who de-escalate, make sure you're doing your best to practice that and model that other times of the week.
And I'd like it to be a skill
just
set of
during
mine.
Crisis.
Yeah, I think it'd be nice to be a skill set of mine before my kids. I mean, I love that.
I continually reference that with anyone I meet with. We almost always start off like, what are your victories? What's going well in life? We want to continue to develop that skill set of finding, looking, and celebrating for what is good. Because it's a shame for so many good things to be unrecognized. And then just to highlight a few of the things that we think suck when there was arguably a million things that are in awe. We should be in awe of well, you don't really know why your heart continues to work, but it did again today, even though it could have stopped. And the people actually obeyed the traffic signs today when they didn't need to. They could have ran into you, right? The list goes on. And to celebrate that, there's nothing wrong with it. You're not saying everything's right in the world, everything's perfect. You're just saying these things are great. And if there's something that sucks, let's talk about it. So to unpack it, it's oh, so-and-so said I cheated. And they told the teacher, and now I'm in trouble. and I'm worried that I'm actually going to have a reputation or there's going to be consequences, and I'm really worried about that. It'd be silly to be like, oh, just put your head in the sand and be grateful that you're breathing, kid.
Yeah.
Like, because you could be dead, right? Like, that's not helpful.
Right.
It's true. But what's helpful is, oh, this is a thing we should probably talk about and solve, so you feel like you're not being mischaracterized and you feel like you have a plan to follow. And then you can step out of the place of worry and get into a place of gratitude. But that situation would require some lifting of some sort. But if someone says, well, I'm worried that someone might say I cheated tomorrow, and then the teacher is going to believe them. Like, well, hold on. No one said you were? No, but they could. Oh, okay. Now we have a made up problem. Okay. And say, oh, I make up problems too. That's not crazy. But it is kind of a crazy idea. Like, no one did it. There's no reference to that. So I'm wondering why you want to suffer in that space. Well, I don't want to, but I can't stop thinking about it. Okay. Do you want to keep thinking about it? Well, no, but I don't know how not to. Oh, okay. Let's practice something. Let's practice just like a quick reset. And let's just say, what are some like 5 things we're grateful for in this life? And then let's see where things sit after that. And that's a reset potential, but there are lots of resets. Let's go for a walk. Let's go make a drink. Let's go throw the ball. Let's go listen to this music. Like, just some way to kind of get out of the rut of that thought pattern that they're obviously stuck in.
Yeah. So I heard one the other day, as far as those quick little on the reset deals, is maybe with the younger kids, is calling something the wrong color. And they're just like, oh, look at that green tree or that pink tree. Like, that tree's not pink, you know?
Yeah.
But it just sort of,
resets them,
totally
right?
resets them, takes them out
Yeah.
because like they instantly recognize that color's wrong, you know?
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And we talked about that in de-escalation.
Right.
Like doing something odd or funny, it works well usually because it catches them off guard and it changes lanes in their mind. Like, wait, what? I'm supposed to be upset right now and you're doing this silly thing. This isn't right.
yeah.
And you just said the wrong color. We need to talk about this because, that's wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have 2. So what are the 2 statements? One, you're a kid. You have nothing to worry about.
Yep. And then the second one was going right to gratitude, right? Or
yeah.
You should be grateful.
You
should be grateful.
Right. And
these
then,
are the don'ts.
These are the
way.
don'ts.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe the most classic is others have it worse than you. Why are you complaining?
Right.
And the logic behind it is obviously understandable, right? And true. Like, but that's always true. Like, there's always someone in the world that has it worse or better. And the concept by itself is flawed, from my opinion. It's like, if we're going to reference how I'm regulating based on what I think everyone else is doing, I'm staying in my head too long, and I'm grooving this habit of comparing, which I don't want for myself or my kid. I don't really want them to get in the habit of like, well, hold on. I had a good day, but who had a better day? I had a horrible day, but someone had a worse day, so I should be good. Like, it's a weird benchmark to regulate to. We do it very naturally because we're conditioned early on to compare and contrast. Who gets picked first? Who gets picked last? What's your percentile? How do you fit in? No one wants to be the worst, but someone was worse today. And who was it? Well, I'm so glad I'm not them. They fell down. Like, I just kind of tripped, but they fell like flat on their face. So like, at least I didn't do that. I would say, well, what if you did do that?
Right.
Because someday you might fall right on your face, and you need to be able to handle that and not be able to trust that someone else had it worse to boost yourself back up. But we do that weird kind of trick, right? So to say you shouldn't feel bad because so-and-so doesn't even know where they're going to get their dinner tonight, and you're complaining that I didn't have this special thing in the pantry. How dare you? Is the concept valid and understandable, and is it respectful? Not respectful. Is it appreciated? Yes, that's true. Does it work very well? No.
No.
And then you're like, why do it if it doesn't work well?
Right.
Right? Instead of them saying others have it worse, let's talk about unpacking what they think is so bad. And give them a skill set they can actually use in the future versus the bad one of like, well, hold on, was my day good? Well, let me look around, see who else had good days or bad days, and I'll score myself. And if at a high enough percentile, then I'm going to say I had a good day. That's a lousy way of evaluating life, right? And getting stuck in that trap. So saying what's bothering you, what were your intent, what were your hopes, and what made today so bad, or what made this so difficult, unpacking that for them, and then figuring out, going back to that first example, is it a game plan or is it release? Now they have a skill set that they can use over and over and over without any like negative effects to it. The comparison one breeds a really bad habit of like, how do I score within everyone, the world? And then it's going to say I did good or did bad. You don't want to teach that. That's a really crappy way to regulate. Versus what's bothering you. Is it a real thing? Most things we worry about aren't real things.
Right.
Meaning like there's not a gun at my head. I'm not bleeding. I didn't just fall off the cliff or the ladder. I didn't crash. My car didn't break down.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm making it up. Well, it could. Okay, you're right. It could, but so could about a billion other things. We can't spend time calculating all those. What's probable, or a common technique is what's likely, what's worst case, what's best case, what's most likely case scenario.
Right. So when you're real quick on that, when you're unpacking that and you're asking the questions and you're saying, hey, what went wrong today, right? And then do you like that question of how would you handle that differently?
Yeah. I'd ask,
like once they give you the answer and they say, well, this is what went wrong. And then asking that question, okay, cool. So how would you handle that differently? I'm just trying to think of ways to pull them out of that idea of, oh, the world's falling, I'm a victim, this bad shit keeps happening to me, oh, poor me, versus, oh, I screwed up, I made a mistake, maybe I could have handled it better, and learning from it, right? So is there a learning moment there, or is it and just sort of that divide between that victim versus bad things just happen to me, or there's sort of a cause and effect of like things you can control versus things you can't control?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Question. Great question.
Thank you very much. See, it's just all about training, and now I'm just set up for success, huh? Yeah.
If I'm going to compare myself to how many good questions you asked today, I'd say you're doing better. Wow. You're a better human.
Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely. The goal is to get them out of that mindset that these things are happening to them, and they're stuck. Or this thought is happening to them, they don't know how to get out of it. In order to take a step towards more responsibility and or learning, I like to ask, how do you feel about how you handled it? Is that the way you wanted to handle it?
Oh, yeah, I like that.
Because that's an easier slide into the subject versus what could you do differently next time? That's a good question to ask maybe second or third round, but right off the bat, it insinuates they did something wrong, and they might not be in the mood yet to acknowledge that.
Right.
But if I asked, are you pleased with how you handled it? If they're not, it's safer to say no, because it's not saying you're wrong and you got to fix it. It's a different feel of a conversation. And then they say, well, no, not really, because I wish I would have da-da-da-da-da. Like I asked my daughter that the other day, and she had some friend drama, and I said, well, okay, I have my prognosis of what I think is happening and what should be done, but I asked the question, well, what did you do? How did you handle it? And are you pleased with how you handled it? Just let it sit there. And she actually said like, no, I didn't handle it the way I wanted to handle it.
Yeah. Wow. Nice.
And then maybe say something, maybe not. Maybe she'll want to talk about her idea of how to do it differently next time, or how she wished she would have done it. If she leaves it right there, I might say like, oh, what does that mean? Like, what would you have done or differently that would have been more in line with who you want to be? And that you can see we're getting to the desired path without judgment and admitting like a big failure.
Right.
But you get to the learning part way easier. And so that's the same concept. Like let's say they have an entitled attitude right now. And you're thinking, you little shit, do you have any idea how much we do to make this life work for you? And you want to complain about that? And then we go through others have it worse and you're just a kid, blah, blah, blah. But really, you want them to be grateful for it. So just take steps towards being grateful. And how do you do that? Find a way to meet them where they're at in their emotional state. Say, hey, you know what? I know what that feels like. Sometimes I feel like I deserve more. Either at work, I deserve more recognition, or I should be called more by my friends. But when I stay in that space, it usually makes me bitter. It doesn't work very well. So I just want to highlight that I know what that feels like. Let's unpack this a little bit more. Like, are you really being like damaged as a kid because we don't have those things left in the pantry? Like, is that like a big deal in life? Right. Now, at this point in time, that's kind of sarcastic, and they know that, but it's not fully sarcastic. They could say like, well, yeah, I deserve this. Like, I need this in life. And your alarms now are going off. You're like, oh my gosh, you are an idiot. We got some real work to do here. But don't react, because you want to just move them over to gratitude and say, hey, you know what? We can't get everything in life, but we can get lots of things. Have you talked to mom or dad about that thing? And do they know that that's something important to you? Has that ever been brought up as a plan or a wish? You're not saying they're going to get it, but as like an employer would do with a disgruntled employee, of like, well, have you addressed it in a way that you advocated for what you feel like you want? Maybe no one knows what you really want. And you move them from victim place to advocating and empowered, like, do something about it. Right. You might not be able to fix it. Mom or dad might not buy that thing for you, but you're going to get better practice at advocating for what you want. And you might get better practice at hearing no in a respectful way. Or negotiation, like, well, hey, you know what? I already buy this for you. Would you be willing? Do you want me to cut out one of those things to add that? Yeah. Right? Now they're thinking like really critically versus it just came down, you little shit, you're entitled.
You can buy your own damn applesauce pouches.
That's the last time I'm buying you bread.
Yeah.
But do you see how it creates conflict?
Right.
Versus teaching. And you're not inviting them into the desired space you want them to be in. You're almost keeping them over there. You label them entitled. Mm-hmm. That behavior was. But you don't want them to identify with it. You don't want them to stay over there any longer than necessary. And so in a way, you're kind of tricking them over to be like, let's be grateful. Without me telling you should be grateful.
Yeah. And I feel like there's just a lot of basics, or I would say like the fundamentals, right, that we've already been talking about in some of the other episodes, as far as the parent coming in first, cool, calm, collected, asking questions, not going right to the lecture, and I guess modeling a lot, right? So it's like all of those things are all in play here, like from the beginning.
Yeah, it's a lot of responsibility if you think about it too much. But if you were being a really wise parent,
or a pretty good parent,
or just pretty good,
yeah,
you're regularly calculating what you're modeling, because that's what's teaching and being absorbed. And it looks very hypocritical to kids for mom and dad to be preaching one thing and live another thing, right? Like to say you shouldn't be complaining, you should be grateful, but then mom and dad complain and aren't always grateful.
Like when your box wine ran out the other day and you're throwing a tantrum, Maybe
that happened.
Maybe your wine coolers, I don't know. Anything.
Yeah. And then you're basically saying it's okay to throw a fit. Mm-hmm. It depends on what it's over or how old you are. And, is it approving, right? But to normalize their disruption, their emotional disruption, and then talk about releasing it or addressing it makes a lot more sense than judging what you think they should be worried about or not worried about, and then leave them with no tools afterwards. Be grateful. Like, that just sounds like make a gigantic leap over here to feel better versus, hey, let's practice. Mm-hmm. I struggle with this from time to time, or actually often. You're not alone in this. Can we do it together? And to see how it feels or works. Like, invite them into the solution. I highlight this a lot with parents when it comes to like getting them to do chores or things around the house. I would say the parent has a right to sit there and point and say, clean that. And if not, I'm going to give you consequences. Let's say they have a parental right to do that. But what works better? To say you need to clean up your room and they throw a fit, and you have a chance to go on one lane, have a control battle, or the other lane, get them to be the solution and get them to be the kid you want them to be. What does that look like? Maybe start their chore with them.
Right.
Not because you're trying to eliminate their ownership of their task, not because they need that. It just might work better. All right, I'll make you a deal. How about let's just start together and get the wheels rolling, and then we'll see how it goes. You're teaching what it looks like to get stuff done. The goal isn't to always do the lifting for them. It's not to always clean their room for them or with them, but to get them to do it versus having a control battle about why they should do it makes a ton more sense, right? And that's the enter into their space with them, and getting something started from a cold stop and turning is a lot harder than like getting some momentum. Once the momentum's going, it's easier to turn. Get some momentum with the kid, whether it's like, let's practice gratitude. Let's do a reset. Let's unpack your thing. Can I help you do your chore for a few minutes just to get things going? Mm-hmm. They're not alone, and they're not feeling bossed at, even though I'd say as a parent, you have a right to boss them. If it works better, do something else. The goal isn't to do their stuff for them. It's just to get the wheels rolling so then you can hand it off and let them take it to the finish line.
Yeah. Well, and I think you said empowered, and when we were talking about unpacking them and kind of and letting them be empowered, and to me, I feel like that's huge. Like in our family, like when we empower the kids, it's like a game changer, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like especially with the chores, for example, right? So, I think on that, a quick side note, I think I'm always reading blurbs and stuff like that. And I think Harvard or someone did a study on that and said that kids that do chores is like one of the biggest, predictors of whatever our society's term of success, right? But just how they feel empowered, right? They're part of a community, part of a family. They feel responsibility, all those things, right? And so I think, just when we came at it from that angle versus it never ever worked when we said, oh, you ungrateful kid, do your chores because we said so and shame them or whatever. Just never worked, right? So,
well, it's in injecting them in a kind of a negative spirit over a really positive thing. Like,
right.
Contributing is a great thing. Work ethic's a really great thing. Feeling proud about what you do is a great thing. You want them to feel great about it. But if you're angry and threatening and trying to instill this work ethic, it doesn't go in well. Mm-hmm. So it kind of goes into the wrong door. Like they might develop a work ethic, but it might be because they're afraid of like all their stuff being taken all the time.
Right.
Versus they know how it feels good to be proud of themselves, and they know what it feels like to make their mom and dad proud. Mm-hmm. So just understanding like what you're modeling, how you're talking about these principles in your home, how you model it is just as important and sometimes even more important, because it kind of determines what door it goes in, and then it's likely to be accepted or rejected. The second they're like the angry parents not looking, the kid doesn't want to clean their room. But the kid who feels like the parent is kind of in it with them, and they're going to kind of fail the team, is likely to keep doing it when the parent isn't looking.
Right.
Not every kid, not every time, obviously. But you build loyalty, you build camaraderie. We're in this together versus do your part or else I'm going to do this to you. That's divisive. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden they're on their own versus we're in it together. Like, this is our whole house. Can I help you take care of your part and get it going so I can go do some of my part?
Right. Yeah. That's awesome. So should we do a quick little recap, Josh, on everything? So when your kid is feeling anxious or in an anxious moment, all right, we had our three kind of pitfalls, right? And one,
you should be grateful. Others have it worse. You're just a kid. You don't have anything to worry about. Yeah. Those are the three common principles or statements that don't land well.
Yeah.
Instead of being great, tell them they should be grateful. Invite them into a practice of gratitude. Maybe a quick little reset, and then let's just try and see what it feels like.
And I like that you said unpack too. When you said when you're doing that reset, right? Let's unpack this together, right?
Yeah. Ask questions. Let them articulate it. The better they're able to pull their stuff out of their mind and deal with it, they're developing the skill set they need for independence and self-regulation. If I'm doing it for them, they still might benefit it, or they might absorb it a little bit, but they don't really develop the skill set. So I want to make sure I tee them up just enough so that they can do some of the heavier lifting, and unpacking it's part of that. Like, oh, what is that? Why did that bother you? You might know why it bothered them, but having them say it really helps.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks, Josh. I have now a nice little game plan for the week.
Oh, good.
And I think by using this, we'll also implement chores and have a really clean house on top of it.
And everyone's going to have a great attitude.
It's just going to have a great attitude and grateful.
Yeah, no complaining.
No complaining. There'll be zero. But this is awesome. Thanks again, Josh. It's always a pleasure. And
yeah, likewise, buddy.
Yeah, hope you feel better.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
I feel like I'm going to just have positivity, just override the negativity.
And tea.
And it might not do anything to my voice.
And hot tea. Hot tea for everybody.